Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Final Sector podcast. Before we get started, just to let you know, if you enjoy these podcasts, feel free to hit subscribe and comment your thoughts below of any of the topics that we discuss or any feedback you have. We're still looking for feedback, so just let us know. Follow us on Twitter. We have both become a lot more active on there. We've been tweeting a lot about preseason testing, which it's been pretty fun actually. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I think you were looking at possibly getting us on Spotify or SoundCloud or something.
Or both, yes.
Yeah, or both. So if you'd be interested in something like that, we can look into that further. I think we've had a couple of people interested. So maybe one day we'll get on there. So just wanted
2022 is the goal.
One day. Going to do some driver news first. There's a lot of stuff. We'll start with Williams. Williams have decided to retain Jamie Chadwick as the development driver for a third year in a row, so that's really, really good for her. She's been killing it in like the W Series and various other series, so they said it was I saw a quote, it's a no-brainer to keep her on. So, yeah, really, really cool for her, keeping her foot in the door of F1, so...
Yeah. Always good. I think we mentioned last time, and a few other podcasts, status of some of the different women at the different levels of junior and higher categories of motorsports. So this is just another good sign that everyone's still actively thinking about that, all the teams. So
yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff, Williams,
so, yeah, speaking of Williams, they've also confirmed Aitken to continue as their reserve driver as well. No real surprise there. Obviously he filled in for it was only the one race, or was it two? I forget. I feel like I've had this discussion with you before.
Because there was a few of them that were in and out different places. So
he filled in with one or two races for Williams, and obviously they've liked him enough to keep him on.
It was just one, because it was the one that Russell was away.
Yes, because he went to
he would have just replaced
the Mercedes.
Him for the one race.
Yeah, sure. Yep. So Williams, they've got they've got a lot of drivers on board, so that's good for them. The biggest. Well, I was going to say the biggest. Actually, it's not the biggest. The second biggest news in driver news. We've got, sort of out of nowhere, Alpine have signed Kvyat as their reserve driver, which kind of completely came out of left field. It just sort of, you thought Kvyat was gone, like he, obviously been dropped from the AlphaTauri team, and they just like, hey, look, I'm with Alpine now. Okay, cool. Good on him, at least. So, it's good to see that he obviously still wants to stay in Formula One. He's kind of gotten out of that Red Bull circle that hasn't really helped him, I guess, the last few years. So, yeah, we'll
it's
see.
interesting, because it was in 2018, I think, Kvyat was one of the reserve drivers for Ferrari, I believe, after he was initially dropped.
That's right, he was
too. He went from the Red Bull AlphaTauri kind of cycle, or what would have been Toro Rosso back then, to then Ferrari, to then come back, to now go into Alpine.
Yeah.
So obviously, as a test driver, he obviously does something that people behind the scenes quite like. Maybe he's good in the simulator at picking up the small details.
Possibly, yeah. So
more kudos to him. I think he's certainly... I don't think he really needs to redeem himself, but I think he did kind of redeem himself and show that he still has it after, going through an interesting career ups and downs.
Sure.
Yeah, good on him. I'm happy that he's kind of continuing on in that kind of position. I guess it shows as well that Alpine is still thinking about, what they're doing with their future staff and their drivers, and this whole change they're doing, and even their quite different management structure they have at the top this year. And yeah, even
there was a lot of discussions about
someone
that.
like Kvyat in. Yeah, so it's cool. It's
yeah. They've got a lot of drivers in the background, obviously with the Alpine Academy as well. So to bring in even someone. He might not be an absolute top driver, but someone with the experience of Kvyat as well. It's really, really good. So, and yeah, moving on to the biggest driver news, Hülkenberg. Can't get rid of him. He's around forever. It's looking more and more likely he's about to be announced as a Mercedes reserve driver, which in turn means he's an Aston Martin reserve driver, which in turn means he's a McLaren reserve driver. So, yeah, because Aston Martin and now McLaren have come out and said they've got this deal where they share their reserve drivers and their development drivers, it means that he's kind of got his foot in the door for three teams now, which, he's still come out and said he wants to come back to Formula One. It seems pretty obvious, with the moves that he's making. He's just ever so slowly, finding his way into more and more crevices of Formula One to try and find a way back in. Like I said, he won't go away. He won't go away.
He's keeping himself as active as he can. That's all he can really do. And I think it's still just credit to him to say, it's not like he's still heavily involved in other series and he's training 24/7, you know what I mean? We've seen shots of him having a nice, beer and bowl of chips watching the race, you know what I mean? So he's certainly, it's not like he's, he's still training as if he's fully in the sport and everything. But I think the credit to that is that he, has that relaxed nature, and yet he still came back last year and did those fill-in races and did amazingly. And even on a technical aspect, everyone was saying he hasn't lost any of that kind of, that ability to be able to improve the car and set the car up and everything. So I think it's a no-brainer from a test perspective and potential as a future prospect for maybe one of those teams or
absolutely,
to try to show stuff for a different team. It's a no-brainer, and I think everyone's quite happy with that. Yeah,
for sure. Will be interesting to see some of the Hulk and back memes if someone gets COVID again. One of those teams,
never ending.
Because obviously, with Mercedes, they have their other reserve drivers are Nick De Vries and Stoffel Van Dorn, and both of them are in Formula E. So if they're off on Formula E stuff, the only other person I think they have is Hulkenberg. So
yes,
he has a real shot. If someone can't make a race in one of those three teams, he has a real shot of filling in. So we might get to see a little bit of what we saw last year. Obviously, fingers crossed that no one gets COVID again, because we don't want that.
Yes, or has some other serious incident that he'd be needed. But
exactly.
He might still do a session here and there, which might be cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Russell's come out and said he'd be willing to remain at Williams if he's unable to get a seat at Mercedes. So I guess he's just trying to cover his bases. He I think everyone sort of thinks he's going to move to Mercedes sooner rather than later. And I think what I'm sort of gleaning from this is that, he's willing to bide his time. Eventually there's going to be a seat open up, from either Hamilton leaving or Bottas being dropped. Whether it's this year, whether it's next year, whether it's 2 years, like, it's going to happen. And, I think he's just saying, I'll stay with this team, particularly now that they're sort of potentially on an upward trajectory after the last couple of years. So, but yeah, it's he's come out and said he's happy to stay with Williams. It's a team he obviously respects quite a lot. But Mercedes haven't made him any promises. Obviously, they can't really say yes, you'll be in that car for next year, and at least not this early anyway. So but
it certainly seems to be like a statement of, I guess people are asking, like, look, if you don't get that shot in 1 year, 2 years, would you then try and move somewhere else? Would you try and maybe move to a Ferrari or a Red Bull or something? This is him saying, honestly, look, even if I have to be here, and even if regardless of how well they do, I'm still happy to sit and wait because it's got that confidence, And I mean, we've seen a similar thing with Ocon and Wehrlein, where they similarly had to wait a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think in their position as well, you could argue that although both of them put in decent results, there still maybe wasn't enough where everyone was screaming for them to get in the seat, you know what I mean? I think Russell is the first in a bit that we've really seen, like, there's no reason at this point that, if he did miss out on the seat in a few years and he was going to be dropped from F1, I think it would be a travesty. Everyone would go, oh my god, what has happened here? Like, politics of F1 gone mad, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it would be a massive disgrace. So I think this is his way of saying, look, I know it's coming, and even though everyone would love it to come next year, if it doesn't, he's still happy to wait. He's got that confidence behind him, and he's just going to drop to the media.
There's no chance he's going to be dropped from Williams, like he's
no, like, be quite. You'd really need to think of something left field for that to happen. Either he had a massive injury or something happened to the team, or it's so he might be at Williams for a little bit while longer, but I would expect to see him in that Mercedes for sure. And I think he'd still give his full beans to do his part as well to try and build that team. You know what I mean? I think he's not saying, oh well, I'm just going to sit around on the couch and do whatever because these rich guys are paying me to be here. I'm not going to help you out. I think as well he's really in it for the short term and potentially medium long term for Williams. Are trying to build them up as well, and I think he's excited to have that. Almost as another way to prove himself and to continue to push what he can do in that car, like we've seen in the previous year.
Also, I think having Button as an advisor in that team for this year as well, I think is even more reason to glean as much as he can from Button to build that team. So build his experience and whatnot. So I think it's going to be a big year for him. In terms of the team and just his development as a driver as a whole, I think. So, Yeah.
Certainly. I think, yeah, you'd say that he's certainly ready to go up to the next team. You wouldn't say now he's kind of just waiting his time and almost wasting his years here. I think there's actually still quite a lot he can gain from the position he's in, even if you'd say he's more than ready to kind of move up to the next level. So it's good for him. You like to see a driver, even if they're stuck low down, they're still going to get something out of it.
Moving on to current Mercedes driver in Valtteri Bottas. So he's come out and talked about how over the winter he's worked a lot on his mindset and his mental health and things like that, and he's basically come out and said he's going to be a bit more assertive and possibly even selfish this year. And a lot of people are likening it to he's doing a Rosberg, so he's trying to, he's been in the sport long enough. A lot of people know he's very chill. He's kind of laid back. He's not really that assertive. Yeah, not that assertive sort of personality. So, he's come out and said, I want to change that for this year. I think he recognizes that it's probably a last ditch attempt this year. Like if he doesn't do anything this year, he's probably going to get the boot. So, he's well aware of that, probably more so than anyone else is. So, he knows that if he's going to get the world championship, he needs to be more aggressive. So, and that's the mindset that he's taking into this year. So,
I think extending to that even is, you could say, yes, he hasn't been the super aggressive, but at least he's always been consistent. He's been more number two driver than you'd argue very much. That other number two drivers have been in other teams in recent years as well. So from that perspective, he's certainly doing his role there. But I think this is a case of saying almost no matter how he does, he's basically, his time is stretching thin. So I think even if he maybe pushes that little bit hard, he maybe makes a few extra mistakes, maybe it causes a bit more controversy, I don't think that would hurt him. It's almost just like, this is the year where you can do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he doesn't have a choice.
Have an instant or two extra. It's like, go for it, honestly. You know what I mean? It's like, what have you got to lose at this point? You keep doing what you're doing. That's great, but it's not going to change your result. Then if you did push a bit more, have a few incidents, it's probably going to be the same result anyway. So
yeah, for sure.
I think, renewed, rather than him trying to continue to develop as he is, it's maybe a bit more of that switch tactic thing and a bit more of a switch mindset, and different than the past few years where he's obviously come out and he said, this is me, point 2, you know what I mean, or point 3, or and we've seen he has that strong start, then he tethers off. I think he's trying to say, no, like, this isn't me just saying the same things, I'm actually reversing a different route, and maybe you'll see something completely different. We'll go, is this the same driver? Maybe that's what he's trying to say, you know what I mean?
So it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds.
To follow, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that's enough of driver news. I think that's about all I've got. Moving on to team news, I suppose. Porsche and the VW group have come out and said they're considering entering Formula One, but it's entirely dependent on the new engine regulations. Porsche are very much a fan of the sort of e-fuel step that they're going to take. I think Formula One sort of have to announce what more specifics in terms of the direction they're going with, the e-fuels and whatnot, before Porsche basically deciding what they want to do, whether or not they want to enter a team. So it's unsure whether they want to enter as an engine supplier or a works team, but at least the interest is there. Porsche's they're massive. Porsche and VW is a huge company to come into the sport, so I'd be surprised if F1's looking at that saying, oh, we don't need them. They're going to be looking at that thinking, that's a big name to bring into the sport, so it's something they'll be looking at with probably keen interest. So yeah, and
they've shown interest over the past kind of, I'd almost say, decade now. You've heard murmurs come up and then going, okay, we're really looking at it, and they've faded a bit. And I think even when you look at it, that's probably down to the fact that they've been saying, whenever we get into talks of engine changes and maybe looking at a bit more radical changes, and that's when they sprout their heads up. But then when it goes back to more conservative, they go, probably not then, you know what I mean? So now I think because they've got this engine freeze and the cost saving, they've got all that down now. I think this is them saying again what's saying, okay, well, actually, this is when discussions are happening, and it looks like at this point, again, it's heading in the direction we like. As soon as some more concrete info comes out, then maybe we'll, give it a more serious look over. And I imagine that will probably happen sooner rather than later, because you've got the freeze now, and you've got the cost savings all sorted out. You kind of have a path to almost what you almost need to define what those regulations are going to be sooner rather than later, because if you have this kind of, cost cap and what you can apply, then you have to consider in the future what the cost of that implementation research is going to look like. You can't look at it last minute and then go, oh, we've only got X dollars left. Well, we're stuffed, you know what I mean? They're going to have to give them a bit of warning so they can properly look at what that means, look at how much they want to put into that. So I think it's good from the Porsche and VW Group's perspective, because they might get that few years heads up way. They can actually also go, okay, this is what it looks like a few years out. What are we looking like in a few years? Does that align with us, rather than having to maybe decide in a year or less than a year if they want to enter? So even though this is kind of, the same old thing of them, poking their heads in and going, yeah, we're interested, we'll just see what it looks like. I think with the way this is lining up,
it looks a bit more promising, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a more of a serious challenge they might have stated in the past. So it's very exciting, especially with the dropping of Honda, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We really would like to see another brand in there, potentially other brands, and if these guys are interested, then who knows who else is interested,
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Well, we've already talked about a few teams going to enter, but I think this is the first one that has the potential to be an actual engine supplier. So that's a big thing, like you said, with
on
Honda
its own
leaving.
merit too. Like you saw when Honda entered back, and that I think was a strong partnership just for Honda, but also that whole McLaren Honda thing. A big part of that in the marketing was to try and get those two back together. When you think Porsche and Volkswagen, you don't go, oh yeah, they sit with AlphaTauri, let's go. You know what I mean? There's none of that. So they're obviously entering independently, trying to grab maybe some other teams independently to work with them, which is exciting as well. That you don't really know what that looks like, and you start thinking about those storylines, and that's cool to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Honda. We're going to go to some slightly more depressing engine talk, but Christian Horner has said in an interview that there's no talk of Honda returning to F1. Obviously, Honda sort of come in and left, then they came in, and now they're leaving again. So there's always going to be that conversation like, oh, could they come back again? But from what Christian Horner's saying, because of Honda making this commitment to concentrate on their fully sustainable tech, I think it was by 2050 or something. So that's a long way away, still 30 years down the track. It seems very, very unlikely that Honda are going to come back into the sport, which is a shame. But this is why talks with Porsche and the VW Group and the like is so important, because these other manufacturers are basically saying, yeah, actually, we're not that interested in coming back. So,
and it might not be just a blanket thing. You kind of got to see that, I think Honda specifically came out and they said it's not to do with the costs or the culture or anything like that. It is just because them internally as an entity are really trying to focus on the electric. But there will be others, such as Porsche, Volkswagen, which are focusing part on that, but aren't totally focusing on that, And you'd think,
for sure,
with the amount of car manufacturers that are out there, that there's got to be others as well that are still looking at that kind of biofuels area, or even the reduced cost area. They may want to get back in, but just the sheer cost and the effort needed to make an engine and all that again has been appealing. So you hope that those two things together as a slightly different angle of approach might drag some more in, even if Honda have fair enough just said, even if you're making this change, this isn't what we're about, you know what I mean? We're more likely to go into FE at this point.
So
for sure. You could say in the long future, who knows? Maybe. Never say never. But
of course,
it doesn't. You really couldn't make much of a case for them to come back anytime in the next 10, 20 years at this point.
There's
some pretty radical changes. So
yeah, for sure. All right, well let's talk sprint races, because we haven't heard much about them recently, but they've a little bit more information has come out on those. First bit is that Silverstone has become the first race to host a sprint race. So they're in discussions with to bring it to the Italian, Brazilian, and Canadian Grand Prix, but they're not sure which ones they're going to go with. But Silverstone is a definite. That's going to have, unless anything changes, but yeah, it will have one of these new sprint races. So, or sprint qualifying, I think is what they're calling it, because they don't want to associate it with the race. I think that's what there's a lot of criticism that it's going to devalue the race. They're trying to take the name race off it to kind of almost separate it.
Thing,
So, but yeah, sprint qualifying is what they're officially calling it. So, but yeah, Silverstone's going to be the first. In terms of, there's obviously been discussions that possibly there could be championship points involved. The current thought is that it's going to be only the top three drivers, and if you get first, it's 3 points. second is 2 points, and third is 1 point. So a very, very small amount in the grand scheme of things, but, it does bring some weight to it, at least.
And it's still trying to push more of it being a second part of the qualifying format. This isn't like another separate little thing. You have your practice, you have your quali and your race. They're not just trying to shove this into the race category or as a new category. They're saying, no, this is an extended part of the quali format.
Exactly.
Even if it is technically racing, it is still qualifying. And so this is their way of saying, look, we will award a slight incentive just because it is still, I guess, it's still a race, and I guess there's more justification to give points towards that, but it would really only be just a very small amount. I think we've spoken about it before, and I think most people are up for something different. I know there are still quite a lot of big names in terms of journalists, like respected journalists, not controversial journalists, but people who most people generally look to that have been still critical of it, because
even drivers I think have been critical. Like Ricardo's come out and said that it's like he thinks it's going to devalue the race a little bit, and
and I think because although we do want change, I think people are saying, well, look, we're actually putting so much effort into this, but there's probably other things that you could try to spice it up that could use this much effort and discussion that would maybe yield a more positive result. But I think at this point they're just saying, look, we've talked about this forever, let's actually bloody just try it, and then in future years we can actually look back. So some people suggest we can go, but we actually did try that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And still at a year where we've got this final year in these cars as well, so I guess it's another way that might spice up the series just a little bit this year. Even though I think with some of the technical changes and team changes, I still think this year won't be as boring and dry as some may be feared. We're going to get another year of these regulations. I think this is just another bit just to add to it to make it another nice season with some stories before we head into next year. Yeah, I'm all for it, but I totally get why some people aren't for it.
For sure. I think that the biggest thing that it has going for it is the fact that it's only at 3 races. Like, there's 23 weekends, I think, this year. Well, so far, assuming
tentatively booked in.
Yes. So it's only 3 of the 23. That's such a small percentage. It's enough to trial it to see if it works. They're obviously the races that they're going for, obviously Silverstone, Monza, the Brazilian and Canadian Grand Prix. These are big races that have been on the calendar for a long time now. So they're trialing it at these sort of big Grand Prix. They'll have a pretty good idea whether or not it works at the end of the end of the 3 races. And I think Ross Brawn's come out and said, he's like, you know what, if it doesn't work, we'll put our hands up and say, you know what, didn't work, we'll try something different, or we'll revisit it. So and I think there's not much more they can do, except for, a lot of people want it to stay exactly the same for the rest of eternity. And it's just like, you can't, at least they're trying something, and you know what? It might not work. That's fine. And if it does work, then you've got something cool, I think that's my stance on it anyway. So Formula One and the FIA have responded to the Saudi Arabia situations. For people that don't know, the Formula E, is it Diriyah? No, I
believe so. Yeah,
something
the
like
Diriyah
that.
Circuit.
Yeah, Diriyah Circuit. So yeah, their Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia for Formula E. They had a missile or drone attack that happened during the Grand Prix that happened in the same city that they were in. I think other cities as well, but it hasn't been confirmed that the actual Grand Prix was a target. But, obviously there's been talks that why would we go to Saudi Arabia when there's a threat of, missile attacks and drone attacks and things like that. So Formula One and the FIA have come out and said they would never go to a high-risk security area, kind of a generic blanket statement. But I think they said they were confident that, they can keep it a safe area, at least for now. But it's at the end of the year. I think it's the second last race, isn't it? It's right before Abu Dhabi.
I believe so, yeah.
So, if things do seem to get worse throughout the year, if it escalates, they might think about removing it and just not going there, which would obviously be the safe option. It's just kind of adding more fuel to the fire. Not more reasons not to go to Saudi Arabia with stuff like this coming up. So nothing happened. During the Formula E Grand Prix, everyone was safe. I think they had missiles that intercepted, the American missiles intercepted them or something. So everyone was fine, thankfully. But, there is still the thought that, but what if? So, it is something that they'll have to look at very, very closely. if it does get worse over the year, if they don't if they don't cancel it, I think they'll have a lot of people on their backs being like, what are you doing? This is not okay. So but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. In some more happy news, the Aston Martin have revealed the new safety and medical cars, which if you haven't seen them, the Aston Martin ones are very, very pretty. They're, I think, how long has it been since someone other than Mercedes has had a car, like a medical or safety car? It's been a while. It's been many, many years. So, but
most people who would have started watching in the past decade or so would be familiar with just the
Mercedes,
the safety car, the AMG,
and Mercedes. I think they've got the red livery now as well.
They've got their reds, that red and green contrast. Red and green is quite cool to see as well.
Very, very cool. Yeah. So, Mercedes and Aston, they'll be sharing safety car appearances throughout the year. So you'll see different ones at different Grand Prix, and you'll be able to tell them apart because one will be green, one will be red. So, pretty easy to tell from a distance, which I think is really, really cool as well. Murray Walker has passed away at 97 years of age. We found out this morning. It's very, very sad. You go on Twitter and all you see is just a lot of outpouring and of love for him. He's one in a generation, isn't he? He's quite often touted as the voice of Formula One, and understandably so. When even for me, who didn't start watching Formula One until maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, he is still the voice of Formula One. He just is. If you think Formula One commentary, you think Murray Walker. So,
and even there are. I think what differentiated him as well was just his character. And when you think back to certain events, sometimes you'll think back to certain passes or certain moves or certain crashes, and you won't even really remember it because of the drivers or what it meant for the title at the time. You remember it for Murray's commentary at the time, You do have maybe a few events with the current commentators, and this is nothing against the current commentators. I just think in contrast, when I think back to a few events, I really just think about Murray's reaction to that and what he said at the time, you know what I mean? Less so than actually what happened.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean for a way because he might have said something silly or something funny, you know what I mean? It's just, you could tell the passion in his voice and maybe his live reaction, when
you could tell he loved the sport, didn't he? He just absolutely adored
I mean, it's a perfect comment. A perfect one of that was when Schumacher in Spa in I'm gonna get this wrong, maybe 1999 was lapping the McLaren. I think if it was Hakkinen, and when he came up behind him and he hit him, and Murray just was like, "Oh my god," and it was just, you just remember that, and he was as shocked as everyone else was.
Yeah.
His raw emotion he put in was so, just his passion just
so
spread through, and you could really tell how engaged he was with it, and if you need any more than that, you can just look at some of the interviews people have done with him recently, or even some of the stuff that Martin Brundle, who of course he started his commentary career alongside Murray, and he learnt a lot from him. There's some great shots of when they started commentating together, and they were in the studio together, and they took some shots of the two of them, and you can see Martin just standing there watching Murray as he's really getting into it, talking about the gear changes, you can see his body language, and he's just always so into it, and even in his older age he would still actively watch it and give his opinion when he could, and I think just amazing. And I imagine as well he would have brought a lot of people into F1. Even,
absolutely,
even when I was young and I played F1 97 and 99, he was the commentator on that game. And I still remember all his lines from that, and I used to laugh as a kid when they would play, you know what I mean? So even as a kid in that regard, I have such fun memories of him.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, it's a very sad moment, but I think it's another great time to recognize how much he's done and what an amazing character he was and how much he did.
Absolutely. So, rest in peace, Murray Walker. All our condolences to family and friends. He was, like I said, he's one in a million. Let's talk about the final car launches. We've still got, I think, 6 to go.
Yes.
So we talked about the first 4 launches on the last podcast, so we're going to talk about the final 6. Alpine. I don't know how to pronounce it because I thought it was Alpine at first, and then everyone said it was Alpine, and now everyone on the commentary saying
Alpine.
Everyone on commentary saying Alpine. Everyone's saying Alpine, and I'm just like, is it Alpine? I'm going to call it Alpine. Everyone else is doing it because everyone on commentary during testing's been like, it's Alpine. I'm just like, oh god, now I'm questioning
myself. I'm thinking about it now. I'm not sure.
Anyway, it's Alpine/Alpine. So yeah, they launched their car. What are your thoughts on it? Because I love the livery. Absolutely.
Well, I mean,
love
we were all hoping it was almost a shoo-in, but you can never know with these teams. We were almost hoping that they would replace the black, in the winter livery that they had, which was interesting. I guess they just needed something to have for show cars as they put around the world.
For sure.
But yeah, they've got that blue on there, that nice shiny blue. It does look nice, yes, it's a big step from, of course, the traditional Renault because they've got their rebranding. And I think some people quite like the Renault as well. But I think, this is nice. They've got the colours there, as an homage to France, of course.
Of course, yeah.
They've got the nice, I like on the rear box how they've got the red and they've got the A over and that kind of forms into the white band. It's pleasing, in terms of the colours. I think some people mentioned in some areas, the only thing that lets it down is it is a little kind of like thick and wide in a few areas.
Right.
Which is just more of the car's body shape. But that's nothing to do with the actual paint job.
Yeah.
It's just nice. You just look at it and you go, nice,
Yeah.
You see it out on track,
very pleasing.
It looks good. And
out on
think
track.
About, you see Alonso in there with his helmet, you go, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, the classic Renault sort of designed helmet with the blue and the yellow, and it just looks, it looks really good. It's almost nostalgia worthy sort of stuff. So, but yeah, no, I think in terms of like actual technical things, I think one of the biggest thing is I think we talked about it slightly before. You haven't really seen it, but the Alpine airbox behind the driver's head is a big boy. It's fat. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there is some technical reason. I don't know why, but yeah, it's a lot bigger than like everyone else's. So
yeah,
a lot of people are harkening it back to like, was it like 70s cars where they had the big airboxes or something. So I'm not sure sort of what the general idea is behind it, but
what the implications are.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously have some reason for doing it, so we'll have to see.
There'd be plenty of info out there if you wanted to find out yourself, I imagine.
Yeah, if you check like
I know the race has already put up a lot of good videos, and
Yeah.
they put up a lot of podcasts, and they really are good at highlighting all those things.
Yeah,
so,
if you want more technical stuff, the race is usually my go-to as well. So
yes,
yeah, they're very, very good. Let's move on to Mercedes, which we already sort of saw a little glimpse a couple of days before they released it. But yeah, they fully released it, and I think it's not too bad actually. I'm still not completely sold on the sort of the AMG
it definitely
thing
looks
at the back.
better on track, I think, especially in light when you see it.
Yeah.
It makes it look nicer than if it has a dark background or if you just shine like studio lights over it.
Mm-hmm.
It does look nice when you've got kind of like that out in the open with the white background or a sunny background.
Sure.
Like you can say kudos for them for going for something different. I don't think anyone expected them to go down this line different in terms of with the AMG.
Yeah. It is
just another way, I guess, to plug the fact that they're still very much, AMG and that link to their car brand.
How can you tell that with AMG though? I can't tell.
I think it looks good how they've got the wheel rims that blue as well, which kind of looks nice.
Yes, I didn't even notice that. That's
cool. So I always like that when they try to do a bit more with the rims to make them shine out a bit.
Yeah.
So it's it's an evolution on last year. I think people are glad that they stayed with part of that. The black color, and obviously they're still pushing a lot of their support for that. And I imagine through this year they'll still be pushing that a lot. Be very much behind that publicly, which is we've talked about that a lot, and we're both very much in favor of that. Good on them.
Yeah.
We hope to continue up and always support that. I need to see it, probably more on track and a bit more. I reckon a good contrast as well is when we get into some proper fighting and battles, and you start to see some of the cars with each other.
Yeah,
you can kind of see how they look, when they're head to tail and side to side. I'm not against it though. I see why some people are.
And
I could argue that just the simpler last year was better.
I think the reds, the more I've seen with the red Ineos thing, it's the more I look at it, the less offensive it becomes. Like when you first saw it, it sort of stood out like a wart or something.
It looks like it's just been splashed there. It's slowly, it's like a virus creeping more and more over the car.
Yeah. But then you notice it's like I think they've got Ineos like little red things on the front. No, I don't know about the rear wing.
The inside of the front wing.
Yeah.
I believe,
So and if you look at it from the front, which I would have put a picture up, it actually looks really nice. So I think it's not too bad. I like that they've changed it a little bit. They've innovated a bit from last year, and like I said, that red's less offensive to me than when I first thought. So not too bad at all. All right, let's move on to Aston Martin. Now, Aston Martin, I wanted to like this more than I did. It's so my thought, and I saw a few other people on Twitter talk about this. Is in certain lights, it looks incredible. Like
yes,
under
it's like the Mercedes so much
Yeah.
in daylight, but more so
it's
under
so
other
different.
conditions. It's yeah.
It looks like swamp water in certain lights. I'm just like literally, it's so dull and just uninspired under certain lights. I'm just like, I want to like it, but yeah, when you look at it, like the photos that I'll put up, it looks really, really gorgeous under the right light. But yeah, it's
And I think the biggest thing outside of just the tinge of green they've chosen, of course, is that they've retained that. I don't remember if we kind of discussed it last time when it was still being negotiated, but they've continued that deal with BWT as a minor sponsor.
Yeah.
And which we'll go into a second. They've got a bit of a deal with Vettel there as well. But yeah, they've got that pink stripe, which I don't think many suspected. I think a lot of people saying, oh, they're finally getting rid of that pink. Not necessarily a mean thing, but it's like, oh, it's going to be weird to see it without pink.
Yeah.
And they've still splashed it there. And in the initial studio shots, it did look quite offensive. It looked like it had just been slapped there, and I think the car kind of people will look a bit larger than it was.
People were saying it looked like a sliced watermelon, I think. And
yes,
it's just like,
yes.
I can see that.
But then again, out on track, people actually go, oh, that actually kind of works. It lights up nicely. There's a nice, sleek line through it. But I guess as more of that partnership, I believe is Vettel actually has a
pink helmet.
I forget pink helmet. I forget, it's something like change the world one drop at a time, something like that. And basically, apparently, I know Will Buxton was saying that over the past few years, often when Vettel does interviews, and he sees that the reporters have plastic bottles, he'll actually bring it up. He'll say, "Why are you drinking out of a plastic bottle? You should get a reusable bottle." So he's actively pushed that himself, just as a minor thing that he's like to do.
Yeah. And
this partnership is part of that, where BW2 are trying to push a lot more from their brand of a lot more recycling water in third world countries, and as well, a lot of this plastic bottle, trying to get more into recycling of that and reusable bottles. So
which I think Formula One has adopted now as well. I think Formula One have adopted they're not doing single-use bottles as of this year as well. So,
and I think I think it was fair enough. Some people initially screamed out and said, "Oh, well, they've actually just paid to put this all over Vettel," and people quite liked his German colours he traditionally had.
Well, no, he sort of embodies it as well.
Yes, I was also saying he's immediately come out in media and he said, "No, like this is something I've always been passionate about. I'm glad that they're staying with us because I can actually use that, and now I have a further voice behind me, and maybe he can also almost be like an advisor for them as well and do some promotional stuff for them for something that he's just as passionate about." And I think it looks kind of cool as well, the lid.
It's not too bad.
It's definitely different, and I would get if some people were like, "Oh, but they really like that traditional German kind of color." Yeah, that's fair enough. I won't doubt that. But I think this is a good initiative. It's not like you just look at it and go, "Oh, sponsorship." It's actually
it's the same.
Found a way
it's
to
the same thing with a Mercedes livery, where you look at that, and even if you didn't like that, you can be like, "Well, the message behind it is solid, so you can't really hate it too much." So no, I pretty well agree with just about everything. I hope that Aston Martin looks good on track more than it looks like swamp water for me.
Yes.
That's all I want. So as long as that happens, then I'm fine. All right, let's move on, and we're going to move on to a controversial one in Haas. All right, where do we start? All right, let's start. Forget everything in terms of it looking like a Russian flag. How do you think it looks, disregarding that? Because I think it actually looks really good.
If you just look at it and you don't know who the drivers or the sponsors were, it looks nice. It's again another big change for Haas, who have been through different title sponsors and that. Obviously, they've been trying to find their footing. They're trying to just temporarily make it through the interim before they can jump into the new regs, the new cost changes. We've spoken about that. But by itself, it honestly does look.
It looks really nice. Yeah.
They've got that theme where they have the kind of black coming up from the bottom, so it actually makes it look a lot thinner rather than stretched below.
Yeah.
And I've always liked when teams do that. How you've got the bodywork just merges into the black and also makes the sponsors below look quite nice.
Yeah.
It does look nice by itself, I will admit, and seeing it out on track, it is actually quite nice. Yeah. And especially when a lot of teams have done white, and sometimes white can be a bit bland in the past as well.
Yes.
By itself, it is quite a nice little looking thing.
But we would be remiss from talking about the fact that with the the Russian flag is not allowed to be shown, or like any mentions to Russian, because of, I think, something happened at the Olympics. Was it 4 years ago?
I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Cut this out if I'm wrong. It was something to do, I think, with the anti-doping scandal, and there was a lot of controversy with a few Russian athletes, and therefore I think they have a 2-year
ban.
Correct me if I'm wrong, 2-year ban on anyone being able to represent themselves as Russians. I think they have to represent themselves under that, global flag.
RAF, I think, Russian.
Yes.
Something. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, the doping agency, they're actually looking into this livery now. I guess there's been enough outrage that...
They did clear it with the FIA beforehand. They were very quick, understandably, come out and say, we've cleared this with all the relevant parties.
Yeah.
I guess the doping agency looked at it and gone, just so everyone's aware, we will have a think about it. I'd still think they'd kind of clear it, because it's not... Yes, it shares the colours, but you know, like, how far do you go? Do you just say, if you're only using these 3 colors, you're not allowed, you have to include, like, can they just put, like, a tiny bit of green on a corner and go, there we go, it's got green on it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yes, it is uncanny. Yes, you could also argue, well, they've got their title sponsor there, which is a big Russian brand, so, you know what I mean? Obviously, the tie's there, but then that's still, again, you know, they could have been more obvious with it, I guess. If you just had... If you had someone like, for example, Schwartzman in the car and you saw this, I still think you'd go like, yes. I think it's just because it's that brand tied with Mazepin, and we're not going to go into it, but there's been all that talk about, you know, you can read it online if you want to. You can search up Mazepin. There's some Reddit threads about kind of his family and potentially what he's tied with and all sorts of kind of, you know, revolutionary Russian stuff and tied to all sorts of politics there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even recently Kvyat, and you can even look at some videos of Kvyat sometimes when he's been asked about, you know, Russian media and politics and that, and almost every time he'll just shut it down. He's just like, I'm not associated with that. I don't care for that. I'm here to race. Yeah. Yes, I know what my, you know, what my family are under and what my name is under, but that's not who I am. I'm Kvyat. I'm here to, you know, race and be myself. And you don't really see any of that tied with Schwartzman as well, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Even though you can even argue that his car last year was in a similar vein, shared those similar colours coincidentally, you still didn't see many people bring it up. It's just because you've got this sponsor so tied to such a controversial driver who's so tied to such a controversial father figure in Russia. It's a tough one. I still think it'll sort itself out. There's enough pressure on it where if there genuinely was a need to change, or if there was, you know, too much politicalness, I think there's enough voice behind the people and behind the media that something would be done about it. But ultimately, I mean, I'm just glad that at least Haas have a way to keep themselves secure for now, even if it's a short, medium-term thing. I think they would have really tried as many options as they could, and this was the best they could get, you know what I mean? I don't look bad upon Haas, but you can't help but still overlook, you know... the obvious, really, as much as you want to try and forget.
Exactly, so... But, I mean... Again, discounting all of that, I think we can both agree that it's not a bad livery. So if it does get cleared, I'm sure there's still going to be people that just won't let them live it down. But if it does get cleared, then you know what? It's fair game. It gets cleared by the right agencies. So you know what? I think it looks really, really nice, and like I think it looks a lot better than their old livery. That's for sure. The you know, that one was, I think, fairly uninspired from my eye, but this one actually... It's
almost like a last minute kind of, we just put together who we've got in our books.
Yeah, so... all right, let's move on to Williams. And Williams actually had a really, really cool idea for their livery or their car launch. And unfortunately... There's always people that have to ruin a good thing. They were going to do a like an augmented reality launch through like
via
an
app. So you could like kind of log into it and they would reveal it live in AR.
You could display it on, you know, on your... I think they said your kitchen table, you can display it, and I'm just like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, it's a cool.
It's like a 3D if you had software, to a projection software almost.
Yeah, exactly. But hackers had to ruin that, and they had to completely take the apps off, and they're just like, well, we'll just stick with the traditional launching of the liveries, and launching of the pictures. So it's a shame, but they did release the livery. And I am curious to know your thoughts on it, because I don't think we've actually discussed too much about this. I know my thoughts.
Detail. But, I mean, the first thing you say is they've done well when you look at the side box, which is particularly what you look at. Yeah. They've kind of done well to hide the fact they don't have much to put there.
Yeah.
Like, they have a fair amount of sponsors, but they're medium to small in scale, so, you know, they kind of just splash them around the place.
Yeah.
Of course, part of that is a lot of their backing is coming from within. It was, as we've
yeah.
spoken on before many times, from Doralton, and I don't think they really mind putting their name out there, especially even though, you know, they've effectively taken it off the Williams, you know, family. They still are calling it Williams, so obviously they still really respect that, and they don't want to put their stuff on there to make you go, oh, it's not Williams anymore, you know.
Yeah.
They've still got, you know, the W at the top, interwoven between the blue. I mean, I'd have to see it more on track, and it's a case where on the studio it looks really nice.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would translate, you know, if the sun's glaring off it, if it might you know, make it look a bit too complicated. There's certainly a lot going on.
I thought it looked better on track personally.
Okay, yeah, I've taken a little bit of a look, but haven't put too much thought while looking at it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's, again, you know, a change up. They've had, I guess, change ups before, depending on the sponsors they've had and all that. The toothpaste car, which still looked good, mind you. I did like the toothpaste car, even if it never actually ran. Yeah, and again, I think this just leads into them, again, shaking up and trying to, you know, push a new identity forward and maybe disconnect a bit from their period where, you know, they had the martini, which was quite, you know, white apart from the martini stripe, and then again this kind of hybrid white and a few other colours, and this still has a bit of that white, but then a lot of this other blue, and even though we have a lot of blue purple cars, which people were fearing would all look a bit similar, and, you know, you've got the little the colour tags they put for each of the teams, you know, and your timing, and they're very similar, but this still visually is very unique. You know, you see it, you know what it is, you disassociate it from the Haas, for example, which, you know, share that white, but they're still very different. So it's not, I like it conceptually, from the reasons that it's different from everything else, even though it's got quite a lot of blue, and just by itself.
My thoughts on it are, I looked at it at first and I was like, oh, I quite like that, and then I realized that it looks like they tried to design a livery for two separate cars. Like, you look at the front of it, I really like the nose. That design is super clean and really nice. And then you look at the body and I'm just like, that looks like if you've ever played Call of Duty and people do got custom camos on their guns, I'm like, that's something you could put on a camo. I think people have made comparisons to, like, the F1 game. They have a default livery that you can put on a car, and apparently it looks very similar to that. But yeah, I'm just like, it just, I mean, all the right colors are there to be the same, but it almost looks like they went for one thing with the nose and they went for a different thing with the body. And it just looks you know, the more I look at it anyway, the more it kind of feels a bit disjointed in that sense. But I would have liked if they had, whatever they did with the nose, they kind of continued that with the rest of the body, because I think that would have looked really nice, and that probably would have been my favorite car.
Maybe a bit more of the yellow in the rear as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would have been really cool. But you know, it's still not too bad. Like I said, I think it does, from the minimal running I've seen, I think it does look a little better out on track. So, you know,
I think it's very much an angle thing as well. Like when you see it from the side, the blue is a lot more easy to see. When you see it from front on, you see a lot more of kind of the sudden white into blue, you know, that kind of chop off point, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think it's very much an angle thing. Again, I think once we sit in a bit of battle and a bit of, you know, moving through some fast corners and some of the active camera work, maybe we'll see if it works or if it's a bit too much. But again, it's you can't blame them for trying something very different than sticking with a boring white car with not a lot on it and not a lot of sponsors, which some people might have been fearing, going, oh dear.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll move on to our last car. And the last one we have is Ferrari. Now, I was expecting absolutely no change at all, and I was mostly right, except they've decided to put some mold on their car. They've got a weird, I guess, is it the Mission Win now or whatever it is?
Mission Winner, yes. Yeah. They're not Marlboro sponsoring.
Right, okay. Because I guess they can't do
if you're
that,
not familiar, I guess if viewers aren't familiar,
I'm not too sure.
And McLaren are doing a similar thing where it's kind of a brand that's not a brand. Mission Winnow is kind of, they're like a generic brand that have a statement, you know, to do positive things in the world and change the impact of, you know, climate change and plastic use, and they're kind of just a generic kind of brand. I think they're either owned or heavily tied to the Fiat Group and Ferrari. And part of that, I think, is still this whole ongoing thing of subtle, you know, Marlboro advertising, which of course it's Ferrari, of course, you know, from history that's a big thing. I think it's similar with A Better Tomorrow, I believe, is McLaren's version of it.
I see.
Which I think is less of a tie, but I think they're similarly tied to kind of that kind of thing. I don't think we've talked about it much. There's plenty of info. Again, Google it if you want. I think even Donut Media have done a video on some of this advertisement kind of thing about Mission Win Now and that maybe a year or so ago, and that was a really good lighthearted video.
Cool.
So check that one out. You should easily be able to find it with a search. So that's why it's there. But yeah, they've chosen, as you say, to go with the green for it.
I don't know, man.
Haven't looked at the reason why green.
No, I don't know either.
I think they've said it some places where they can't have because I think there's some places last year, and especially this year, they won't be able to show it, have that there, so it won't always be there.
Right. Okay.
I think they still get some credit that they've taken that what is it the burgundy you call that red they've got at the back that they ran in the 1000th Grand Prix last year?
Yeah,
I forget
sure.
what they officially
Let's go
call
with
it.
that.
Yeah,
Burgundy,
they've actually splashed that on the back, and that's cool, you know what I mean? That's like an evolution to say now we're in our, post 1000th race, they're changing up a bit in that regard for the full season.
It's a different shade of red. We did it.
Coming from a team that doesn't change a lot, but that actually looks nice, it's quite a clean cut on track, that does look nice. It's that splash, which I don't really know how it's going to look. I think in some places you won't probably notice it depending on the lighting. Apparently on track it's not obscene. I haven't seen it too much. I've mainly seen what people have been saying about it. I don't know how much you've seen it on track.
A little bit, but no, you don't. At least I haven't noticed it. Like, unless you look for it, I imagine you probably won't notice it at all.
It seems like they made it stick out a lot in their marketing shots when they first put out the car. I think
tricky lighting stuff.
Making you see it and you just go,
ooh.
oh,
yeah, it does.
And it was more interesting because I sorry to interrupt you.
That's
I think I think the car leaked even an hour, a few hours earlier. I think people were able to access a hidden page or something on the website. So the original photo leaked, and some people were like, no, this can't be real because that looks awful. And then a few hours later, a few hours later, they're like, a few hours later, they're like, this is it. Everyone's like,
oh no,
it's the green is real.
God. Oh god.
Everyone had their memes ready to post. So
yeah, I don't know, man. That green caught me off guard.
Yes. Bigger point I'd say though is that they certainly showed a lot of their changes straight away. They showed the evolution of their nose, how they've got a lot more of that kind of cape design and it hooks in. Their wing is a lot more. I think it's kind of I don't know the words to use. It's it comes in a lot more aggressively. Their air boxes have changed a lot. So a lot of the changes they've been saying they're making, immediately you look at it, even in their promo shots, which a lot of people are keeping fairly secret, you just go, whoa, that almost looks like, like a new car. Like they've really shifted a few bits to the maximum they're allowed to without using their tokens. I think majority of their tokens understandably went to, their gearbox and their rear end and their power unit. No shock there. You don't need to be a scientist to figure out why they would have spent them there. And yet they've still got quite a lot of changes. Some areas you've gone, wouldn't they have to have like a major change there? But they've really just pushed to what they're allowed to change there. So in terms of looks and the from a technical aspect, that's something to at least to go, okay, they're trying to not be crap this year.
Well, I mean, a lot of their things, it wasn't just I think might have talked about this last week, is a lot of their issues weren't just power unit, it was aero as well. So they've had to improve a lot of those areas as well. So which is why I guess you're seeing
aero stall and
which is why I guess you're seeing a lot of those sort of more radical changes. They need to catch up really. So they're trying something pretty different, but
and as well, but obviously being open and honest, saying, look, we've obviously made changes. Here they are. Look, we've been talking the past 12 months. We're going to make changes. We'll just show you straight away. Like, we're going to be open and honest.
Absolutely. And that was the last one. So that's all the car launches. And now I'm going to ask you a question. What is your favorite? Do you think?
That's a good question. Give me 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
I'm having a look.
We're on a time schedule here. It's alright, we'll cut out. We'll put on some elevator music as you're thinking.
Yeah. It's tricky because there's not one that stands out, but there's not one that I really hate more than the others. When you see them all together, they're all very unique, despite some sharing very similar colours.
I think I know which one I'm going to go with, because I actually didn't even know the answer for this one.
Honestly, probably the Alpha Tauri. I just really like it. I think it kind of fits its vibe. It kind of is quite unique. It still kind of looks like the Red Bull, but it's very different, but it doesn't really flaunt itself. It kind of almost states itself as like a nice midfield car almost through its livery, you know what I mean? it's just nice. I just like that they've kind of flipped it, and I like how the blue kind of flows through the white, and how that they've got like the 60-40 blue white as it goes towards the front of the car.
It does look a lot better. Like I was skeptical, and I think you said we have to wait to see it on track. And now that I have seen it on track, it does look really, really nice on track as well. So
compared to last year,
yeah,
last year was
100%.
still nice. I think this is just a nice evolution of that. You know, the second year of this branding, I believe.
Yep. I think that's right.
And as well with the white rims internally look really nice as well. So I think it's got to be that from what I've seen so far. There's none I could tier list them, I guess.
Ooh,
You kind of
that
got
could be
that
another
on the
video.
front. Yeah,
Ooh.
maybe like 8 or so in the middle,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
1 or 2 at the end.
Yeah.
I think that just sticks out. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts?
So
Your
mine,
turn.
I've had a little bit of a think, and I think, on a good day, that Aston Martin is, the color just really, it just looks really good under the right light. I think it is probably one of the nicest looking cars. It's so simple, but it's so effective. I really, really like it. But when it's not looking at it at its absolute best, I'm still a big advocate for that Alfa Romeo. That Alfa Romeo is so good. It looks so nice. And I don't think I sang its praises highly enough last episode, but yeah, it's so good. I just love the white and red combination, and how they, all the sponsors, and just everything seems to work really, really well for that car. It doesn't feel like there's any wasted space. So, yeah, really, really nice. That'd have to be overall. I'd probably say Alfa Romeo in terms of livery for sure.
Can't blame you there. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Alpine obviously really, really good, and yeah, that'd be probably my second favorite overall, I think. But yeah. Anyway, that's going to do it for our podcast. Thank you all for listening. I think we've gone nearly an hour again. We have. Amazing. But, yeah, thanks all for watching. Let us know what your favorite livery was, or if there's anything else you want us to talk about. But until next week, we'll see you next time.
Catch you guys.